What's going on, everyone? Taylor Cowles and Mike Kadlick here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pats Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. Patriots draft is in the books. We're kind of real, and we're trying to get a feel for how the picks act, and to help do some draft superlatives, some way too early grades, emphasis on the way too early. We've got our good buddy Phil Perry of NBC Sports Boston to talk about that and the media availabilities that we had this morning with Juwan Bentley and Mike Nwenu. But before we get started, fellas, how we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Mike, how are you?
I'm great, Phil. I'm happy you're joining us today. We get a nice fresh perspective from the senator. So happy to have you here on with us.
Fresh perspective from the closet, the Gillette Stadium, the famous Gillette Stadium closet. I am fired up to do this.
I just realized also I tweeted and called you the general and not the senator. I need to get my military. Jeez Louise.
I'll take that. I'll take any title.
That's higher, right?
High-paying title. Yes, I'll take them all.
Fantastic.
Titles matter now. Titles do matter now. Okay.
Titles and jersey numbers. Now jersey numbers matter. They take precedent.
Yep.
We got Drake May, Jalen Polk, and Caden Wallace all already not in the 50s. So
don't have to watch your rookie quarterback wear a linebacker number anymore.
No,
how about that?
Times are a-changing down there.
I'm curious to see what they get for Javon Baker. I thought he was going to be one. I wanted that 1-2-3 with the two rookies and Pop Douglas. Hopefully we get that down the line, though. That looks so good. Bunch set 1-3. Tell me that wouldn't be interesting.
I kind of like that. I do like that. What do we have? Do we know what Polk is going to be? Is Polk 1? Is that the deal?
Polk is 1.
Okay.
Who's 2 right now?
KJ Osborne is 2 right now.
Okay. So you could still get that. It just won't be all the young guys. You could still get your 1, 2, 3.
Future. Fingers crossed. All right, so media availabilities today. We had Juwan Bentley and Mike Nwenu. So I'm curious, do you guys have any big takeaways? I felt like with Bentley, basically told us that the defense isn't different, but it is evolving, which you would expect because they got a lot of retentions, a lot of guys coming back. Mike Nwenu told us that during the negotiating process, they talked about playing right tackle. He was open to going back to guard, but that was where the discussions were. Not too much difference in his training, which I thought was a little bit surprising, and also gave us some insight into how the scheme is changing. Said that it's still early, but they are focusing more on not only outside or wide zone, but actually getting outside, which is kind of a surprise to me. So, fellas, I'm curious what you thought about that. Phil, you first.
Yeah, that's where – I guess in terms of the actual football stuff, that was what was most interesting to me today. And we've heard it from other people, right? We've heard Drake May talk about how he's talked about the wide zone offense and the wide zone run scheme and play action off of that with Alex Van Pelt. We heard Ramondre Stevenson talk about it recently as well. So this is happening. And we could have guessed, right, that this would happen because of Alex Van Pelt and his history and where he's coming from. Kevin Stefanski, Gary Kubiak, all the way back to Mike Shanahan. Like, this shouldn't be a surprise. But the reason I find it interesting is because I'm not sure wide zone fits the personnel that they have all that well. The personnel is not going to be drastically different from last year. Michael Nwenu is still going to be there. City So, my guess is, will still be starting at guard. David Andrews, my guess is, will still be starting at center. You do have some questions at left guard and left tackle for sure. But this looks like, with So and Nwenu especially, the foundation for a really effective, powerful, violent, north-south, downhill run scheme, which there is the possibility for that within the Stefanski thing, right? Like, it's not like the Browns only do wide zone or that anybody from the Shanahan, McVay tree, etc., only run wide zone. These teams have, especially lately, incorporated more gap stuff to mix it up a little bit. If they're really leaning into this, I ask you guys, because I know you track this stuff as well as anybody, is it the right thing to do if you have a 350-pound right tackle, or you have a guard who looks like City So, or you have the two guys that you just drafted? This is interesting to me. You just drafted two players who seem like, and they haven't played a single NFL snap, so I don't want to pigeonhole them just yet, but they seem like beat you up in a phone booth, violent, kind of downhill guys. You know, from the scouting reports I've read, neither guy is necessarily thought to be this explosive lateral athlete, which is kind of what you're looking for if you're looking to get outside and you're looking to run this wide zone thing. So is this concerning to either of you that they're going to be rolling with this? even though the personnel might suggest that they're a little bit better doing this other thing. I'll just throw you one number really quickly. Last year, they averaged, I just checked on Sports Info Solutions, they averaged on outside zone and stretch runs 3.3 yards per carry. On gap stuff, power, duo, and I even included inside zone because I think it's a little bit more similar in terms of just running inside and getting downhill. They average 4.0 yards per carry. So it's a difference of 0.7. And they were near the bottom of the league with the stretch stuff and the outside zone stuff. And they weren't great. 4.0 is not amazing, but they were 19th, I think, in the league when you lump those types of runs together. So they were better at the gap stuff last year than they were the zone stuff. Is the coaching change going to be enough to make them more effective with this outside zone style? And does the athleticism of the line or the athletes that they have, the players that they have, does it feel like a good fit for you, this outside zone scheme?
Mike, you want to go first?
I was going to say, Taylor, you can take it, but
I can. I think Caden Wallace is more of that like athletic type. I think he'll be fine in that scheme. Leighton Robinson, I think with him, his reach, he's got really long arms, and his burst off the line are the things I feel like kind of work in his favor with that scheme. Then you go back to last season with the Browns, you had DeJuan Jones primarily as the right tackle for them because of all the injuries. So he does have experience running that same scheme with a guy who's, I don't think he's as good of a run blocker as a Mike Nwenu, not quite as mobile. My thing is, and I think you can supplement getting outside where I don't think Nwenu is a guy you want trying to get in front of defenders' faces and trying to cross face and be that kind of athlete. I'm not sure that's his game. Now you can supplement that with, okay, we're going to have a tight end kind of combo and then push him so that Nwenu doesn't have to get out in front. He's more taking over and then shielding. Whereas I thought he was more going to be walling guys off. Like he said last year, they were involved in more cutback runs where you just wait until they flow too aggressively and then you take advantage backside. If they are trying to get outside, I think it might be tougher. But at the same time, last year, because they were so gap oriented, and this has been a thing with the outside zone going back to Shanahan, where a big emphasis is that chemistry, where they're saying they're working on it already because you need to know, okay, if we get this angle, then I'm comboing with this guy. This is how we're going to handle it. Whereas gap is much more straightforward because it's literally going downhill. You're trying to put that defender in this guy's lap, and it's a lot easier to kind of process and work through. So I think the chemistry, if they are building it, and we're probably going to see in camp, like just continuous reps of outside zone with other stuff mixed in because it's more complementary. I agree, though, the personnel, it does seem like an odd fit. I think City is just athletic enough, but it's not like this is an offensive line full of Cole Stranges where everyone is tailor-made to do this kind of thing. So I think the chemistry is going to be the biggest thing. That's going to supplement maybe a lack of great athleticism at those spots. But I do agree. It's kind of like the Caden Wallace pick where it's a big wait-and-see thing where, we can speculate and we can think of all the permutations where they work out. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to see how it actually gets executed on the field.
And the one thing I'll add to the scheme stuff before I get into some takeaways on today's media availability is just, you, like Phil said, you don't have to box yourself into just being an outside zone team. Like you can run multiple sets. You can run your outside stuff where you want to get outside and get your athletes out in space, but you can also ground and pound up the middle too. Like you can kind of be multiple as long as you're comfortable in all five of your offensive linemen doing both. And B, it's I guess schemed up properly and taught well with Alex Appel and these guys. So it's going to be massive on the coaching and what they think of both the, like Phil said, the phone booth type guys as well as their athleticism. If you can, meld them into both, then you could be cooking with gas. But it's a I guess a good thought by you, Phil, just on really what the guys in the room right now, if they actually fit into that, more athletic mold that you need for that.
And it's just I think it's a good question for us to keep in mind in this post Bill Belichick era where the head coach was the general manager. And so any player that the general manager brought in, the coach was going to understand and have an affinity for that guy in the schemes that he wanted. Now there is, because they are separate people, you have a general manager who's picking players for a coaching staff that is new and trying to develop something here. And I'm not saying that there's already a disconnect. I mean, clearly, Van Pelt gets hired. They start what looks like sort of an overhaul of the offensive line between Okorafor and Robinson and Wallace, all three guys who might end up being starters at some point in time, if not very soon, here for this Patriots offensive line. Van Pelt had to have been part of that process
course.
and has to be able to see how that's going to go. But we have seen this in the past where there is like a little bit of a disconnect. So I just think it's an important thing for us to track from afar and say, okay, is everybody that they're bringing in truly the best fit for what they want to run? And if they're not, how do they adjust off of that? Because I do think there were times, of course, the last couple of years, and like 2022 aside, like I think they're going to get better offensive coaching this year than they did that year. It can take a little while if you do find out, oh, bleep, like this ain't working for us.
Right.
Like you have to be able to change quickly so that you're just adapting and fitting everybody's skill sets as best as you can.
And you can add Jacoby and Austin Hooper to that list too of guys who they bring in personnel wise that clearly fit on what the coaches want because they worked with Van Pelt in the past. So. Oh, there goes Phil.
You lost me. I'm back.
Mike, like with the run game, one tenet of Alex Van Pelt's systems is usually that diverse run game. Like you saw with the Browns, they're known for the outside zone stuff, but they're using everything. There's power, there's counter. Like there is definitely going to be that mix. That's also part of the West Coast scheme because with all the play action stuff, part of fooling the defense is one, you have to think about all these runs, and it's harder to keep track when you see a puller and you're like, oh, this is them finally going to power. And then it's like, oh, nope, they're bootlegging the other way. You totally lost me. And one thing I think when it comes to, who you're drafting, how will they fit into your scheme is that more open draft room and war room that we saw where there's more people involved where when they talked about Caden Wallace, Elliot Wolf did mention that, this was a guy that Van Pelt, Scott Peters, and Robert Kubler said, this is a good guy. This is a guy we think we could turn into a left tackle. So I think it's important to have the scouts say and be like, this is the profile, this is the kid, this is all the research I've done. And then to give the coaches the ability to say, well, I'm going to be working with this guy. So it's not just the Elliot Wolf show. It's all right, is this a kind of guy that has a skill set that the people who are going to be coaching him can work with, can adapt to, and kind of get him to fit the system we're looking for? But I'm also curious if what you think about if they maybe went too far with involving people. Obviously it's a lot of wait and see in this process, but it is very different. So I'm curious what you guys thought about that element of the draft process.
I like it. I think it's good to get as many opinions as you can, especially early in the process. Now, I think, we saw the number of people who are actually in the war room on draft weekend.
Place was loaded.
It was packed to the gills. I mean, more than 24 people standing there as the Drake May pick is being announced on the broadcast. And so, I think it's important to distinguish between, yes, throughout the process, did they hear from a variety of people? They did. On draft weekend, were a variety of people involved in the decision-making process? No. It came down to the closer you got to the end of the process, last weekend, the group got smaller and smaller. And so I like doing that, and I believe in the wisdom of the masses. I think if you think you're smarter than everybody else, and there's a massive crowd of informed people who believe one thing, and you say, no, you guys are all wrong, I've got this, you tend to be more wrong than right. And it doesn't mean you should just always follow the crowd, but I think especially with the draft, I think that can often be a valuable way to go about it, is bring in as many opinions as possible and then eventually narrow it down from there. So I was okay with that. And as we're talking here, just like last thing on the scheme and the fit for those guys, one thing that I have heard from people who have worked in this type of system before is that it can be very, especially tackle friendly. So if you have a question at left tackle, because you are sprinkling in however many, and it's going to depend coach to coach and game to game, and game flow and all that will factor into this. But if you can sprinkle in a half dozen play action passes where, the tackle, because you're booting out, basically doesn't have to just do a traditional pass set and try to block a defensive end or an outside linebacker one-on-one. Well, now you are saving that guy a half dozen snaps over the course of a game where he could potentially get beat. So you're just limiting the number of true pass sets that somebody who might be a little bit limited has to actually take. And therefore, maybe you're getting the most out of that guy. And you're still buying your quarterback time, and you're still doing all these things that can help the pass game overall, but you're actually alleviating some of the pressure on your tackle. So if there's a give and take, hey, are we always going to be able to get outside with guys that are a little bit heavier footed than some other offenses around the league that are running this kind of offense? Maybe, but if it can save Chukwuezefor at left tackle, 5 snaps from having to go against TJ Watt, like, we're happy to make that trade-off. So anyway, that was kind of struck me as we were talking. I think that was an important thing to bring up. But I like the process, the way they went about it. I think it'll be interesting if these guys all stink. Like, we could look back at it and say it was horrible, right, Mike? But I think more brains is better early on, and then you narrow it down. That makes sense to me.
Well, that's the thing with this stuff is time will obviously tell. I mean, we're gonna sit here in a few minutes and go through draft superlatives and give our overall grade, and it's like, all right, you mentioned it, Taylor. You have to preface it with way too early because nobody knows, right? Nobody knows if opening up the war room, but also making sure that Elliot Wolf has final say and can kind of decipher from opinions if that's going to be the right thing or not. Like, Phil, I know you mentioned listening to the masses and then going against them, and it felt a lot like tongue-in-cheek N'Keal Harry stuff, right? When everyone's banging the drum for the AJ Browns and the Deebo Samuels, and instead Bill listens to his friend and Herm Edwards. And is that right? Is that wrong? We'll have to see. It didn't work the last time, but from the outside looking in, and at least less than a week out, it felt like there was more collaboration. People are at least now, and we'll go through each one. 7 offensive players, 1 defender, hitting on some needs that they had. I think it's hard to be upset about it right now, but we'll obviously see how it plays out.
And Bill, to your point about it being tackle friendly, I actually tweeted me because you do have a lot of resetting the pocket. You have a lot of play action, a lot of max protect. Like we saw last year, they were going through quarterbacks and offensive tackles like crazy, and he had to figure out and adapt. All right, how do we make sure we're not just putting these guys out to dry like you saw sometimes with the Patriots last season, where despite the fact that you're kind of in a tough spot with all these injuries at tackle and then your quarterback situation's a mess, you still saw with Bailey Zappi and Vidarian Lowe, they're still going to the drop back passing game. It's like nothing really changed. So I do think, again, like you said, with Van Pelt, one, you're running the ball a lot more, which is immediately easier for your quarterbacks and your offensive line, and you're not giving them as many of those true pass sets where it's the defense knows exactly what's coming. TJ Watt can pin his ears back and really get after it. So thought that was a great point too. This is a scheme that I think is going to do a good job of making sure those guys in those premium spots aren't really hung out to dry quite as often as we've seen in recent seasons. And we're going to get to the grades. We're going to get to the superlatives. First, quick word from our friends at Prize Picks. Be right back.
Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I personally love Prize Picks because they're super easy to use, easy to navigate, and they offer injury insurance, so your entries stay live even if one of your players gets injured. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
All right, so for this episode, we are going to go with our dessert first. We're going overall grades, just to kind of preface our thoughts a little bit and kind of set the tone for what our superlatives are going to be. So, Mike, I'll start with you on this one. What grade did you give? Way too early grade, with that asterisk, for the Patriots this year.
I find it hard to, and I know you have to do it. We have to analyze this rather immediately. I almost just said analyze. That goes to show.
No, you did. You said it twice. Which
how drafted out we are right now. You have to immediately analyze this stuff. But realistically, you got to give it a B. Everyone gives it a B. I think I saw Mel Kiper Jr. gave out 20 out of 32 Bs the other day. Like, it's fine. It's solid. I don't know how these guys are going to play out, but they hit on the positions they had to. They made a pick in, Jalen Polk, which I'll get to. it really felt like a double dip there, and I'll explain why in a minute. You hit on your franchise quarterback, and you only came out with one defender, where a lot of times this team under Bill Belichick, at least we saw last year, might have taken 3 or 4 defenders despite having holes to fill on offense. So I'm going to go with a B. Can't really decide how well or how poorly it'll be yet, but for right now, middle of the road.
Yeah, I guess I would go B+, just because I give them more credit than most, just for sticking and picking at 3 overall and taking Drake May. We talked so frequently, it felt like for 2 months, about what might happen and will they trade down and why they should trade down, and that this quarterback is actually a little bit better than Drake May, and this is the best plan for them because the roster is set up this way. And so I was never a proponent of that plan. I never really, especially the closer we got to it, I never believed that it would be their plan, but I do give them credit for staying there when there were trades available to them that might have benefited them in the future. I applaud them for having conviction in the fact that Drake May can be a franchise quarterback. So I give them maybe extra credit for that. The reason why it doesn't go higher than that, Taylor, is because I'm not sure. While I like Polk and I like Baker, to me, you needed a 1 or somebody who projected as a 1 at that receiver position, and you needed a left tackle. And I'm not sure they got either. Now, maybe they did. And maybe 2 years from now, we'll say, holy crap, can you believe they got Caden Wallace in the 3rd round? And that guy's, top of the league at left tackle, and Javon Baker. My goodness, this guy is, he's Stephon Diggs part 2. We can't sit here, I don't think, and say that definitively right now. So had they, it's always easy to say this in retrospect, but 2 of my guys, quote unquote, my guys during the draft process at those other 2 positions were Xavier Legette and Kingsley Suamataia.
Yeah.
And they both were kind of within striking distance for the Patriots. They would have had to trade up for both, but the fact that they didn't get either, and they weren't aggressive enough. They wanted to move up into the 1st round, but they couldn't quite pull it off. Could they have done a little bit more to actually get to the back end of the 1st round and get that guy that they were really looking for? That would have bumped it up into the A- or even A range for me. So I'll keep it at a B+ for now.
So I've got it at a B+. Most of that's Drake May. I completely agree, especially the day of. I'm thinking, and this ended up being what actually happened, where they were saying, well, Kevin O'Connell and Brian Daboll, 2 guys that we know really want this guy. If they're going to move heaven and earth to get him, why the hell would we move away from getting this guy? Yeah. Clearly, there's something that's pretty good about him. So the Drake May thing I was ripping my hair out, but they stood, got the pick. I like that aggressiveness. And also, I actually had Cameron Wolf on yesterday. He shed some light on some of the things that were going on behind the scenes with the Patriots. Another reason I give them the B+ is they did try to get into the 1st round, and apparently they actually had kind of a handshake deal with the Bills. The Bills used that to go to the Panthers, and they were like, this is our division rival. We'd much rather you have Legette than he go to the Patriots. Kind of screwed him over a little bit, and the Pats weren't too happy about that. And, I was obsessed with Xavier Legette. I'm saying, if I literally actually said like a month ago, if you have to trade back to the 1st round to get him, do that. So I'm kind of feel validated that was what they ended up trying to do. So I appreciate they at least did try to go up and get their guy. Ended up paying off because you get Polk, and you get Javon Baker, which I still think those 2 combined are a better value than an Xavier Legette, considering this is a long-term rebuild. They know that. The way I see it, if you have to get your wide receiver 1 next year, it is what it is. Like, you develop, you try to get some chemistry with these young guys, get them on the field together. I think that's okay. With Caden Wallace, I think, I really do believe that he was somebody that they did like. There was the run on tackles. And again, that was why they stood pat. They thought he was a guy they could get in the middle of the 3rd round. But they said, you know what? If we do that and he's gone, then we're screwed. Because he was objectively the best guy on the board. With Kingsley Suamataia, one thing, and I talked with Eric Galco about this, the Shrine Bowl, was that experience, I feel like, matters more, and age. Because with the guy who doesn't have a ton of experience, with the limited practice that these guys get, it's just easier to teach guys who played a lot of football and have that experience what you want them to do, and they can catch on more quickly versus a guy who just hasn't seen the field very often. And with Caden Wallace, he was a guy who was projected to at least be a contributor. Him, Aiden Layden Robinson were projected to be at least contributors early on, and sooner than later, we're going to be starters. Whereas Kingsley Suamataia, one, he was on the younger side, which again, I think was probably a big part of the evaluation for him, but probably wasn't going to be playing for you his rookie year. That was a big thing he needed to develop. The only tackle I really wanted him to get they didn't was Patrick Paul. And I feel like he was in that group of guys that went before they realized they were going to go. And we're like, oh, okay, this has turned into a serious thing. So I feel like they were more aggressive than we wound up seeing. And the fact they had conviction to not do the kind of Bill Belichick thing, which right or wrong, you could debate. But I like that they said, I like our guys. We're not going to risk trading back and maybe having them there. I think they lucked out with Javon Baker. But for the most part, I feel like they knew who they wanted. They stuck and tried to get those guys. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But based on what I've heard, at least, I admire the way they tried to play the game. But I agree. I can't give it an A- as much as I want to. You know me, Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows, because they don't have that true number one, and they don't have a left tackle where if it was Patrick Paul or Kingsley, I'm like, all right, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're set there. So I absolutely agree with a lot of your points. All right, now, favorite pick, Phil. Going to start with you on this one. Which of these picks got you real juiced up?
I want to say Drake May here, but that feels like the obvious answer. I'm going to go with Javon Baker because I do like a lot of what he brings to the table. I want to start with the personality because that he made headlines with the quotes soon after he was drafted. But I like the edge. I like the chip on the shoulder. I want, especially at that position, I want guys who are a little tapped. Quite frankly, I want that. I want that level of, oh, this guy might have a little bit of a screw loose. That to me at that position is fantastic. And I don't know if they've had enough of that, honestly, lately at that position. They got two guys that I think are aptly described as dogs. They are competitive. They're feisty. They are fiery on the field. You can see Javon Baker going down the sideline along touchdown, catch and run, and waving to the opponents on the sideline, blowing kisses, exactly, pointing at guys, routing guys up and talking trash even when he doesn't get the ball. Like that, I love that. So it starts there for me. He has what looks like great body control, good hands to be able to reel in contested catches. I wrote a story earlier this week, and I know I wasn't unique to this story, but the fit for me for both Baker and Polk with Drake May makes a lot of sense. So you get a quarterback who likes to throw the ball down the field and test tight windows. Like Baker's a pretty good match for somebody like that. You want somebody who works the middle of the field the way Drake May liked to clearly at North Carolina. Jalen Polk should be able to help him out there because he is so good in traffic and his hands are so solid. So the Baker pick for me for a variety of reasons. And I think you could at least see, because we saw him play on the outside and play on the outside a lot at UCF. Like, to me, he almost has more quote unquote number one upside than even Polk does. I think Polk could be like a solid 2 for 10 years potentially. Whereas Baker, if everything goes right with him, now maybe you're talking about a legitimate X who can create some separation, who can work down the field. I don't care that he ran a 4.54. Like, Elliott Wolf and that executive tree that he comes from, day 2 and day 3 guys, even if they're not necessarily burners, then the big names are obvious, whether it's Jordy Nelson or Devontae Adams. Those guys were, 4 or 5 guys that went in the second round that obviously ended up being massive hits. So that ended up being my favorite pick after Drake May.
I saved Javon Baker for most likely to make people in wheelchairs stand up for the superlative. So, so I'm going to go with I'm going Jalen Polk. And it's the player as much as it is the execution of getting the player, because you talked about the run on wide receivers they missed at the end of the first round. Instead, they sit at 34, and we have to take them for their word right now. Elliott Wolf said after the pick that they were comfortable taking him at 34. Instead, they moved back a little bit, got to 37, moved up 27 spots later in the draft, and they take Polk at 37, and then they end up taking Javon Baker with the pick they were able to move up for. So I love the execution of the way that they were able to, again, double dip on receiver with Polk at 37, and then they take Baker later on. As far as the player, you hit on it, Phil, where he doesn't have necessarily true wide receiver one upside, but the comp I continue to see, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is a more athletic Jacoby Myers, who is a ball magnet, who's trustworthy, who can be sort of that binky for your rookie quarterback. Now, granted, he's a rookie coming in, so he has to kind of grow into that, but strong hands, fights through traffic, just a silent assassin. He doesn't have the attitude Baker does, but he's, strong and just seems like he's someone who's going to make it happen and work his ass off to do so. So I think pairing Drake May with a guy like Jalen Polk for the next 5, 10, maybe close to 15 years, if all goes well, I think it's a slam dunk. Now, you could miss, and he might not grow into that type of player, but as of right now, I think that was really solid for them at 37. And again, you can only trust with what they want, what they told us, and they were comfortable with them at 37. So I like it.
Yeah, I think I agree. They're both dogs, man, just in different ways. Like I was watching Jalen Polk, I think it was against Michigan State or something like that. Watching him block, I'm like, this is their Pharaoh Brown replacement. Because he gets in guys' faces. Like when there's a play away from him and he's blocking, he gets fired up. Like they just don't really have that. Kendrick Bourne gets excited, but it's not in that way where it's a little antagonistic, where he kind of is going to talk to you after the play and get in your ear. And Javon Baker does it all the time. Like you mentioned, he like blew the kiss. There was a route I was watching this morning where he just toasted a guy, flipped him around, and then went and pointed at him. Was like, ha ha, I got you. No, you see me pointing? Yeah, I got you. Like that stuff fires me up. So I like having that attitude because it feels like that room is full of nice guys, like great leaders, all that stuff. But like sometimes you need couple a-holes, which I really, really enjoy. Yeah. You guys got good picks. I'm just going to go with the easy one, Drake May. I feel like you got the guy who you can go into every draft in the future feeling more confident because it's, well, they got the quarterback. You at least have that piece, and it's not like a Jaden Daniels who, for me, every year I would be worried, is he going to make it through the season? Whether he stops with like putting himself in harm's way, the frame still scares me. If it's a bad weather game, you're going to have to go in thinking, all right, if he has to hit a deep corner to the opposite hash, is he going to have the arm strength to fit into a tight window? I would be concerned about those things with Jaden. With Caleb, I mean, he was never really an option, so I'm not even going to – like, Caleb Williams is fantastic. I would have been happy with him. And then with JJ, it's like he's going to have to grow physically and also develop certain parts of his game that aren't there, whereas with Drake, he showed all the flashes. He literally was making all the throws. You're just hoping he can do it consistently. Clearly has the mentality to do it. So, yeah, I feel like getting that guy who you can go into – games and all these matchups in this loaded AFC and be like, hey, as long as we have the supporting cast and the coaches, this guy's going to be able to win us games. With the last possession, he can march down the field and win. Obviously, didn't have as much success as a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams at the college level, but you saw it in 2022 when he's ACC Offensive Player of the Year, talked about in the kind of Heisman conversation. It just wasn't a very good team. So you guys went with the better picks, but I'm just going to go for the layup. Drake May's my guy. We got some more picks. First, quick word from our friends at Game Time. Be right back.
With the NBA playoffs in full swing and the Celtics looking like the best team in the East, I'm trying to go to a game so I can witness their greatness in person. And to get those tickets, I'm going to be using Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Buying tickets on Game Time is extremely easy. All you have to do is click on the team that you want to see, browse through the available options, then click on those games. Then you can go through filters like price, where you want your seat to be, all that good stuff. Click, get a panoramic view of the seat that you're going to buy, and it can be as easy as a one-click purchase for your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, now maybe a category we can show some more love to some of the mid to later round guys. Don't have to, but just to try to maybe get them into the conversation. How about some of your best values from the Patriots draft class?
Oh, okay. This is a good one because I think this is my opportunity to talk about Joe Milton. I love this. I love the approach. I don't care that they drafted Drake May at 3 overall. I like adding at that position late in the draft. This is how you do it. This is how you stockpile assets, potential assets. I'm not saying I know Joe Milton's going to be able to play in the NFL. Clearly, is a long way to go in terms of, adapting to the pro game, coming from the system that he came from at Tennessee, and learning, some of the nuances in terms of how to rein in that tremendous physical skill set. But this is how you do it. It's not pay a veteran $100 million guaranteed and then draft a guy at 8 overall. Cough, cough. Atlanta. Like that's not to me the smart way to do it. This is the smarter way to do it. Invest in a player that is the future at that position, and then continue to double down with cheaper investments, because that guy, Joe Milton, could you not see Joe Milton going out and playing relatively well in a few preseason games for 2 seasons in a row, and then the Patriots are able to flip him for another pick if Drake May ends up being the player you think he's going to be? So that to me is smart asset management. It's smart. It's a smart developmental plan at the most important position in the sport, and to do it with a guy who has the skill set that he has, which is obviously off the charts in a few different ways. You put them together with some pretty good quarterbacks, coaches, we think, and Alex Van Pelt and Ben McAdoo. That to me is great value, even if he ends up never taking a snap for you, but he ends up yielding you a pick down the line. I love that approach. I love that philosophy. That is the Packer way in action. I know Patriots fans are probably sick of hearing that, but that's what it is, and it's smart. That's probably my best value from this draft class for the Patriots.
So, Taylor, I feel like I'm definitely stealing this one from you. Not stealing it from you, but I know that you're probably going to agree with me. But it's Jaheim Bell in round 7.
With the guy to back up.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. A guy who on some boards I saw could have been a top 150 pick, goes at 231. We talked about him earlier in our draft coverage, Taylor, on the show. A guy where if you took him at 150, you didn't know if you loved it or, in and around that area. But for him to fall to 231, they had a lot of interest in him. They had 30 visit with him. They met with him exclusively at Florida State's Pro Day. And there is a need for that type of player on this team. Austin Hooper is only on a 1-year deal. Hunter Henry's obviously your lead tight end, but you can also use him at H-back. You can use him. He might have some special teams value too with the way this, the new kickoff rules and stuff are happening. So that's a guy who, yes, he's your 7th round pick. Not often do your 7th round picks make your team. It's more so just to get him in the building and see what happens. But I think Jaheim Bell is a great player to get as late as you did, and just adds another body to your offense that so desperately needs talent. So I loved the value of getting him that late in the draft.
I agree, especially with Bell. When we were talking about him in the 5th, even the 6th, I was like, I don't know, just because he is someone you're going to have to scheme for. Sure. There's versatility in 2 different ways, where sometimes you're like, oh yeah, he can do everything. And it's like, can he do everything? Or are you putting him in a certain spot for a certain situation because he can't do other things? True. And that's kind of where I am with Jaheim Bell. Also not really a dynamic athlete, but that said, I do think he's athletic. He can break tackles. He's tough after the catch. Wasn't used downfield a lot at Florida State, but did show some of that downfield ability to track passes, to make difficult adjustments. And even though I don't think he's a great blocker, which is why I don't like the Juszczyk comparisons, I think Juszczyk is another one of those Debo types where it's one of one. People compare players to them because they do something at a level that nobody else does. I don't think he's as flexible or as effective as a blocker, but the effort's there. So if you put him in the right positions, like it's a crack block or something, it's like, all right, yeah, this guy who's 240 pounds is probably better than one of our receivers. That kind of thing, I think you could use him well. I'm going to go with another easy pick. I'm going to go with Javon Baker. I was pounding the table for this guy in the 3rd round, at the beginning of the 4th round. I literally tweeted right before they picked him. I was like, you know what? If they get Bub Means and that's their second receiver, I'm happy. I'm good. I'm not even going to get myself excited about Javon Baker. He came in and I flipped out. But I really did like him because I'm coming down a little bit from the wide receiver 1 upside a little bit, just because in my head, he looks a lot like, funny you mentioned it, Phil, Stephon Diggs, where neither guy is really a burner, but the way they run their routes, the physicality, the attitude, the hands, the effortless hands at times. I see so much of those similarities where I'm like, they can win in similar ways. Now, I don't think Baker has the top end speed where there's that extra gear for Diggs where he can really break away. I'm not so sure Baker has that. And the biggest gap with these two is the consistency. Where with Diggs, he's all about consistency, and that's what made him a great receiver. Is he doesn't have the craziest physical profile, but he does everything right, and he's a dog. Whereas with Baker, it's like Steve Smith said, he makes the hard catches look easy and the easy catches look hard. He misses a lot of easy ones. You see a lot of lack of refinement in his routes where he's got a lot of tools. He knows how to manipulate guys. Sometimes it takes too long. Sometimes he does a little bit too much. And in this timing-based offense, he's going to have to trim that down. But at the same time, the talent, like I do think he could be a low-end wide receiver one for your team. Although I think his best potential, we talked about this in the car, Mike, is if he can be your number 2 more, and then maybe Jalen Pope's your slot, Demario Douglas is your 4, that turns into, I think, if these guys develop well, one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. But again, I think you do need that true alpha. Until Baker shows it to me, I just can't really rely on him hitting that kind of ceiling. All right, last one, Phil, before we get you out of here. Very grateful for your time. Biggest sleeper from this Patriots draft class. Another maybe excuse to show some love to the underrated guys, or maybe some guys that just aren't getting a lot of love that were picked even in the mid-round. So, Mike, we'll start with you. What do you think? Phil, you got your thinking cap on. I see you.
Well, I hope I don't take Phil's like I just took yours, but I'm going Marcellus Dial, defensive back. Like if you're gonna spend one pick on a defender, it might as well be a defensive back for this team. You're short on corners, you're short on a free safety, a guy who I keep seeing the joke, but a guy you can spin the dial with, is a guy in Marcellus Dial. He's athletic. He's shown an ability to at least play outside corner and then also move and kind of be everywhere and be someone you can use on your entire back end. So again, 6th round pick, 7th round pick, guys who could sneaky not make the team. But I think Marcellus Dial is going to be on this roster, and I think they're going to use him a lot of different ways in the defensive backfield because they need help back there. So they like him. They're confident in it. So I think he could sneaky come in and make a bigger impact than people want to believe.
All right, so this is going to be the sexiest answer we've had this entire program here.
All right.
What if I told you that the offensive draft pick who plays more snaps than any other Patriots rookie is Layden Robinson?
Okay.
All
right.
Let's talk guards. Let's talk guards, damn it. I think there's a chance this guy ends up starting like week 1 for you. And I think Jim Nagy, executive director of the Senior Bowl, made a great point recently. I believe he was on WEEI and said, this guy's a guard only. And if you take a guard only in the 4th round and he's not your backup as your center, and he's not giving you that 3-position versatility that teams want from their 4th interior offensive lineman, that means you might be planning on that guy starting. And I remember talking to teams after the Cole Strange pick a couple of years ago. Man, if you take a guard in the 1st round, and I don't know if this is how the Patriots system is set up now. These are not Patriots people. These are other clubs. If you took a guard in the 1st round, that means you believe he has all-pro upside. You think he is that kind of player. If you take a guard in the 2nd round, you believe he is a Pro Bowler. If you take a guard in the 3rd or 4th round, that guy should be playing for you and playing a lot very soon. And so if that's how the Patriots look at that position now, I just look at the uncertainty at left guard or right guard, whichever one you want to put it, where Sidiso is not playing. Between Cole Strange's injury and he has had a difficult time when he's been on the field, I just think there's enough uncertainty there where they may see him as a contributor and very early on. And so there's a chance with Drake May maybe getting a sort of a red shirt year. Polk should be playing right away, but if Robinson's your starting guard, that if he doesn't get hurt, that guy should be out there for every snap. So that to me, I guess, is my sleeper. He might end up being the most consistent contributor to this offense in 2024. I could see a path to that.
I was actually going to go with Layden as well for a lot of the reasons that you already mentioned. I think Polk is probably going to be the guy from the offensive class that ends up contributing more just because of what he brings. And I think he can really just get on the field, maybe be the exit times, but I feel like he's such a pro-ready player. But I agree with Robinson. I think it did send a message that whatever they think of Cole Strange, whether it's consistency or health or whatever, it did seem like he was being put on notice, especially after the Caden Wallace. We had the panic, like, what does this mean for Cole? With Robinson, it's like, yeah, no, they're serious about this because City So was very good. He was inconsistent, but you also had him at tackle all summer. So I'd love to see what he can do. Also would love to see Cole Strange at center. Cole Strange, Jake Andrews battling it out next summer. Who knows? I think that could be really fun. But I agree with Robinson. The burst, the length to really shut guys down early. Like, he's not the best at mirroring and the most like explosive guy laterally, but I think the fact that he can get hands on guys really quickly, and when he does, like, it's over. He's kind of got like a little Mike and Wenu in him in that regard. I like his fit there as a pass blocker. I think he also has experience pulling, which is going to be big in this system. So I do like him. Since there's not a lot of really great other sleeper picks, I'm going to go with an undrafted free agent, Jacob Warren out of Tennessee, Joe Milton's old teammate. Now, this is a guy who, one, brings a skill set they don't really have at tight end. I think he's got the size to be an inline blocker and be there consistently, which Hunter Henry can be that guy. Austin Hooper, to a lesser degree, can be that guy. But as we saw last year when they had Pharaoh Brown, they weren't really putting Hunter Henry on the line unless it was 11 personnel. That wasn't really a place that it seemed like they wanted him to live because he's more of an off-ball guy. He's more of a big slot receiver who can get in the way as a blocker but isn't really a mover. Now, I love Warren's effort. He's a really smart guy. He was a team captain. Like, the character profile stands out is he's probably going to be one of those guys that puts in a ton of effort, and if there's a spot to be had, he's going to do everything he can to secure it. Also gives you positional versatility. He had experience in the slot. He played running back. He was in the backfield, offline. That versatility is interesting. Again, that intelligence to pick up different spots. Blocking in space as well, where it's not just inline. You can use him in a lot of different roles. And he's a big dude, big body, also a crazy long wingspan, soft hands. You can use him in the red zone. You can use him over the middle on some of your play action stuff. I just think he's going to find a way to make this team, again, because they need someone with his kind of skill set. And I also love the intangibles. He and Deshaun Fenwick are my guys where I really think the undrafted free agent streak is going to snap, and it's going to be at least one of those guys. So I'll go with Jacob Warren as my sleeper pick. I'm excited to actually get to camp and see him. But we're going to wrap this up, fellas. Had a bunch of fun. Phil, thank you so much for your time. Please let the people know where they can find you, what great stuff you got coming down the pipeline.
Thank you guys for having me. This was a blast. You can find all my stuff at Phil A. Perry on Twitter. We are still going to be diving into all of these draft picks and how the Patriots might use them on the next Pats podcast. You can find that at all of your podcasting apps and on YouTube. Watch us early edition, 6 o'clock, BST, 10 o'clock, depending on what's going on with the Celtics. Obviously, we're going to be really focused on Celtics and Bruins as they continue to make their runs, but football is always a topic of conversation on NBC Sports Boston, so make sure you check us out there.
Thanks, buddy. Mike, what you got coming?
Oh, boy. Behind the Mic podcast, you can check that out. I'll have Patriots coverage at CLNS Media as well alongside Taylor, and just waiting to get to camp and see what happens with these Patriots. So follow along on Twitter at Mike Kadlick for all the Patriots coverage.
Yes, sir. And shameless self-plug. Tomorrow I will be doing a draft recap show with Evan Lazar. Watch out for that. And then on the CLNS Media website, I did a deep dive on Alex Van Pelt's offense and why Drake May is the perfect quarterback for that system. It's a long read, but it's years of quotes and stats and film. I think you guys are going to like it. And it's more Drake May hype. We got time. Never enough of that. Appreciate you guys for joining and appreciate you all for watching as always. Now take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.